This week in Pure Reinvention.
The interviewer was asking her, what happened to your automotive job? And she said she was laid off because her job was automated. And the interviewer asked her, do you think that could happen to you here? And she said, no, because the machine can't do what I do. And she's like, oh, how is that? And she's like, because I put passion into every watch that I make.
Episode 38, Bridget Russo, Chief Marketing Officer at Shinola.
Engage, disrupt, adapt, repeat. You're listening to Pure Reinvention, the podcast for curious people.
Welcome to this edition of Pure Reinvention. I'm Mike Bills. I am the founder of the Pure Reinvention Project, and I'm here with my Queen of Sparkle, Misty Miller. Hi, Misty.
Hello, Mike. I'm glad to be here today, and I'm really glad to talk about who we interviewed from Shinola, which is Bridget Russo. She's the Chief Marketing Officer, and she had some really great background to share with us on the Shinola company, their brand, and their core mission.
I was thrilled to be able to put Shinola on the list of podcasts, and I was pleasantly surprised to see just how many examples of our fourth step, Misty, the connect step, were in this podcast.
Yeah, it's just incredible, and I don't think that was something that we had to even plug her with. It's just part of their brand. It's part of what they do.
No, I think that when we talk about the first three steps, disruption, ownership, and simplify, those are all things, Misty, as we've talked before, that are kind of internal to the company or internal to the individual. But Shinola has absolutely externalized step 4, which is connect. And that becomes one of the real keys to the success of any individual or company, is how they take and posture the first 3 steps and then start to connect all the wonderful assets and help to move it forward. And Shinola has done a fabulous job in so many ways of making the connect phase a vital part of their success.
Yeah, and part of that is just coming to Detroit and making that their hometown and their core where they began. And so she tells that story, so I won't steal her thunder as we listen to the interview, but it's worth listening for.
It's a fantastic interview. Listen for all the numerous steps that are in this podcast regarding the 4th step in the Pure Reinvention process, which is connect. And Misty, we'll catch up on the other side of this interview.
Perfect. Let's see you there.
We are really excited today at Pure Reinvention to be interviewing Bridget Russo, who's the Chief Marketing Officer of Shinola. Thank you for being here, Bridget.
Thank you for having me.
The Shinola story is so intriguing to me, and I'm sure it will be to the Pure Reinvention listeners. Bridget, can you give us a brief background on what your company is?
Sure. So in 2011, Shinola was conceived. Didn't have a name yet. I can get to that one later, which is interesting. Really with the intention to make watches in the U.S. at scale, something that hadn't really been done in over 40 years in the United States. So that sort of was the premise of the company. And they started to look around at different cities where setting up shop would in turn create manufacturing jobs, and Detroit kept coming up. Certainly the manufacturing legacy of a city like Detroit was a factor. And when we came here, we just met loads of people from various backgrounds, business leaders in the community, people who were running NGOs to start to build business within areas such as Midtown Detroit. And everyone just sort of said, you know what, hasn't been done before, but let's roll up our sleeves. You know, what do you need us to do? How can we help? And really, it was the combination of that history and the passion and the people of Detroit that brought us here.
Can you speak specifically to some of the true characteristics that you began to recognize in the city of Detroit might actually begin to align with some of the characteristics of Shinola?
Detroit is that city we found as soon as we came here. There's a resilience that no matter what happens, they just pull up their bootstraps and they figure it out. It's a city that was built on hard work and really is indicative of what the U.S. was built on and sort of the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. And so you really feel that in the people here. There's a sense of pride of work and a pride of their community and continuing to stay here and support it despite everything happened in the past.
How are those characteristics then key to the success of your brand?
Well, community is something that's very important to our brand. And so your relationship or our relationship with the community is something that's important for us. Our relationship with our staff and our employees is something that's important for us. And that goes into the product. If you have someone that's passionate about what they're making, that's going to come out on the other end. Knowing the people who are making your products, it's a rare moment that a marketing person would actually know the names of the people working in the factory.
Right.
to me, that's a huge luxury, but also a huge benefit. And so that comes out when you walk into a shop and a consumer, they can feel it, they understand it. And so there is a sense of pride to wearing a Shinola watch or having a Shinola product. I think the consumer likes brands that have a strong story behind them, an authentic story, one that's honest and one that they can talk about. There's social currency there in being able to say, oh, you know, this watch is made in Detroit, and to be able to tell that story. And so that's something that you feel, certainly they might read an article or perhaps see an ad, or our store staff are very well trained in telling that story. So right away they feel that, even down to after you make a purchase. Let's say you make a purchase online and you get your watch, you get a handwritten note with every product that we sell. It's those little details that add to the connectivity of what we're doing, of the people that are making our products with our consumers.
So tell us, what is the story of Shinola?
Shinola really started with a passion for making things in the U.S., for creating world-class manufacturing jobs, and to make products that were built to last. You know, we're coming off of this throwaway culture of fast fashion, and you wear it once and you throw it away. Things are changing. People are hopefully buying less but buying better. And there's certainly a community out there that's supportive of our brand and supportive of brands like ours that are making things with that thoughtfulness and with that care, and also with that give back to the community.
What I like are some of the words that you're using. You're using words like thoughtfulness, you're using words like care, you're using words like quality. These are words that we kind of lost track of in the 70s in the automotive industry, and have just recently begun to incorporate those things back in to achieve the current success that the automobile manufacturers are enjoying. But these are things that are vital to your brand right from the beginning. Is that right, Bridget?
100%. That it's really in the DNA of our brand, and you can feel it when you meet anyone, whether you walk the shop floor or through the offices here. I mean, you see no one has an office. We all sit together in one big room, and that shows. That shows when you meet anyone from Shinola, when you walk into our stores. It's something that you can feel. Now,
everyone will say that we have industry standards or even above industry standards training practices. You're telling me that you do more, that there is a certain way in which you train, in which the store clerk who's selling me my watch can explain the story so well that I want this watch.
I don't know what other companies do, so I don't know if we do more or less. I only know what we do and what we hold of value and what we translate to our store staff, and who then in turn tell the consumer. But ultimately it's about telling the story, and it's real. This you're here, you see we started with about a dozen people and now are up to 400 employees. We launched our first product in 2013, and here we are in 2015 and continuing to grow. It's really just about storytelling. If we didn't do all of that and there was just, a little sort of storefront with a couple of marketing people sitting in there spinning off these ads about Detroit, it wouldn't be real, and you could feel it in a minute. But we're walking the talk, we're passionate about what we do, and the people who are working here are passionate about what they do.
What's interesting in listening to this is that the ability to come up with a unique product is becoming less and less, it seems. But what is absolutely within anyone's control is being able to put the story behind their product. And if the story is strong and compelling enough, and it's matched with the quality that you are talking about, that seems to be the differentiator in today's marketplace.
Definitely. You can put a great looking product out there, and maybe it doesn't have the strong story. It's not to say people aren't going to buy it, but you might not create the same sort of emotional connection around it. On the flip side, there might be brands who have this big story behind it, but then you get to the product and it doesn't quite match up with that message. It's great to be here at Shinola to have both. You have this great story, and then you walk in the store, you pick up the product, and we follow through on that.
What you're describing is we're moving away from a commodity mentality to something very unique and very specialized and branded. A lesson that all associations and businesses can learn as well. And one which I'm going to guess, Bridget, you're going to tell me is absolutely got to be encouraged from the top down.
Definitely. It has to, it's not something you can just add on or just create out of nowhere. It has to be embraced absolutely from the top down and inside out. Otherwise, the consumer's savvy enough, they'll know. They can smell when something's fake.
So how does one begin to embed that kind of culture into a successful entity like your company?
I think it happens organically if the premise from the beginning, and it's not to say that brands that have existed for 20 some odd years can't adopt this sort of direction, but you really have to go all in and commit to it. And so commit to that thoughtful process, whether it's analyzing how you're making things or analyzing the energy that you're using to make it. All of those things will factor in to making that change. But it does have to start from the top, and you have to make sure that everybody along the line is sort of buying into that direction.
Bridget, you have experiences living in different parts of the world, and in fact, even internationally. Yet you found some experiences here in Detroit, I'm sure, to be very unique compared to some of your other experiences. Can you tell us, even in your own personal journey as you've relocated to Detroit, what you have experienced here in what has made Detroit a very unique place to study and learn about reinvention?
Yes. It's interesting because I grew up in Brooklyn. I went to school in Queens, and so my whole life, and I went to university in Manhattan. Pretty much my whole life has been in New York. And I know there's been a lot of parallels made to particularly Brooklyn and Detroit. You don't want to sell Detroit short of Detroit is Detroit. And the one thing I've learned in being here, and I'm by no means an expert, I'm just learning myself, but what attracted me to being in Detroit was really that spirit. I understand why, the founder of the company wanted to be based here. There is a spirit that's here. There's an energy. You have the ability to be creative still in this town. New York has changed a lot. Now you can't buy an apartment for under $1 million. The opportunity has gone away for a lot of creative people, and I enjoy being around creative people. I enjoy being around a place, New York used to be, where if you can make it here, you can make it anywhere. That sense of opportunity to be an entrepreneur with an idea, or an artist with a dream. I think you can do that here in Detroit.
Where does the role of creativity play in the success of your brand?
I think creativity definitely plays a big role. I think you have to be creative to even think of opening a watch factory in Detroit. You have to be creative in, how do you train people who have never made a watch before? And certainly knowing, because I work here and I see it firsthand, but Shinola really is the combination of, smart, savvy business with that creativity and passion for making good products. I think people forget sometimes that you have to start with the product, and that's what we've done here. Certainly, everything else plays into that, and being in Detroit plays a big role in what we do, but it has to start with great product, and I think you must have creativity in order to create great products.
Is it a competitive advantage that you're talking about?
You're always going to find people who will try and imitate a brand that's successful or
Absolutely.
A brand that people find interesting, and so you do have to stay on your toes and constantly think, okay, what do we do next? What do we do that's unexpected? And we recently announced, for instance, that we'll be launching audio products next year. I don't think anybody expected that from us. I didn't even know 6 months ago.
Yes. The key to creativity, surprise everybody.
Yeah. So we've got a few surprises up our sleeve, and
Sure.
And we constantly have to look at what we're doing and say, how can we be better at it, and how we continue to be meaningful to our customers, both new and old.
So it almost sounds like for a successful entity like yours, we have to be just a little bit unsettled, and we're always kind of looking for what's next.
Definitely. We probably all shouldn't have chairs. We should just, have those stand-up desks.
Yes. Well, that creates some form of, not standing in one place too long. And I think probably for a lot of association leaders who are listening to this who have very strong traditions, they're starting to be challenged by a new generation of potential members who have not joined their association yet, who are probably more characteristic of the things your company is doing with the creativity and the branding and the culture of innovation that a lot of associations can learn from.
Definitely. And I think it's important to be respectful of the past, and to, we certainly do. Even our name, used to be an old shoe shine brand, and we reimagined it as a watch company based here in Detroit. So there's nothing wrong with embracing the past and understanding the past, but you have to look towards the future and be ready to change and be nimble. Things are changing so quickly now, especially with social media and just such an immediate reaction to things that you can't be stuck. It's not going to help you, and ultimately it's not going to help your business.
Is it really and truly one of your roles as the chief marketing officer to encourage some of that innovation and encourage some of that creativity to make sure that your employees know it's okay to be thinking different thoughts?
Definitely. I encourage, everyone that works on my team to think out of the box, to, just because we did something one way last year doesn't mean we have to do it that way this year. It doesn't mean just to change things for the, purpose of changing. Mm-hmm. But just being smart, being clever, how can we do this differently? If everybody else is going down that road, what's down the other road? It's important to have that thoughtfulness and that vision towards the future. Otherwise, you'll get left behind.
When you look at another role that Shinola plays in the city of Detroit, which is one I want to spend a few minutes on, there was actually another passion that you have about why Detroit, and that is in the opportunity to build some skilled trades opportunities for people who may not have those skills. Can you begin to share a little bit about the opportunity to find good workers in Detroit and how the skilled trades fits into this?
Skilled trades are so important. Artisanship, craftsmanship is something that sort of is a dying art form. It's something that we were very good at in the past as a nation. And over the years, and as production started to go overseas, we sort of lost that. We also, and I would say my generation included, didn't want to do those jobs. We wanted to be the boss. We wanted to be the CEO or the marketing director or whatever it was, and thought, well, somebody else will make it someplace else. And now that's all changing. It's changing because, consumers are getting smarter. They understand that there's power in their pocket and that, where their products are made are just as important as to where that company is based. Being able to keep the supply chain as much as possible within the U.S. and certainly that helps the economy, which is something on everybody's minds today, but also helps communities flourish. So when we go back to the idea of skilled labor and craft, it's something that's really important and we need to put more value behind. You can, in fact, have a career making something, working in a factory such as Shinola. The face of factories are changing today. Fortunately, a lot of manufacturing is now coming back to the States. So you're seeing a new type of factory pop up, not in the day of my mom who came from Italy and worked in a factory in Midtown, New York. That time has changed. And so, if you talk to folks working in our watch factory, for instance, they say, well, now that I'm working for Shinola, I can, put my kids into school, I can buy a house and do all these things. So there is value in having that type of job, and there's value in creating a place within our cities where those jobs are encouraged and supported.
It sounds to me like that was such an important part of the thinking behind your brand, that was what attracted you to the city of Detroit, was an opportunity to look at rebuilding some of the very specific skilled trades that your company uses.
Definitely. And, even so, Detroit primarily is known for automotive. We found a lot of folks who were coming from that background who are working here, that some of that skill set was transferable. So if they were making leather car seats, they're now making leather bags or leather watch straps. Some of the assembly and attention to detail that goes into assembling a car goes into assembling a watch. It's just on a much smaller scale. So those things are relatable. Being able to encourage education that teaches a skill set. We actually recently worked with CCS, the College for Creative Studies, where we are coincidentally based, and they are launching a degree program in fashion accessory design that launches this fall. And that really came with the intention to not just teach design, but also teach how to make the products that you're designing. And weirdly enough, there aren't many 4-year degree programs in accessory design. Even so, it's the biggest business within fashion. So that was something that we worked with the school, and they were launching, I think they have something like 40 or 50 students signed up. So it's things like that are important, and working with institutions like CCS that can help bring that to life.
You were able to take a population of people ready to learn a new skill set and found them ready and willing, and you put the energy into training them for specifically what they wanted to do, and they responded with a passion.
Exactly. And, I heard an interview once with a woman named Misha who works in our watch factory, and the interviewer was asking her, what happened to your automotive job? And she said she was laid off because her job was automated. And the interviewer asked her, do you think that could happen to you here? And she said, no, because the machine can't do what I do. And she's like, oh, how is that? And she's like, because I put passion into every watch that I make. And I thought, that's it. That's exactly it. She said it, not me, And so that piece is important. I think, understanding that this is really a dying art form that we need to continue to support. It's not a job for everyone, but when you're talking about some real issues of people without jobs who are very much so interested in having these opportunities, you can't just put that to one side. That's something that can change communities, can rebuild cities.
That's absolutely interesting, because when you put passion into your work, which is, I think, one of the absolute number one keys that the millennial generation wants to have, is to have some ownership and passion for whatever their work is. I don't think there's anything that can stop them.
No, exactly. And so, when you speak to anyone of that age group, whether they want to be an entrepreneur or they want to, make objects or whatever it is, they all say whatever they do, they want it to have a positive impact, whether that is on the environment or on the community. They want to make a difference. They don't just want to create things to make money. And that's a huge change in mindset, and let's cross fingers that enough of them feel that way.
And the interesting parallel in this is that is exactly what associations are meant to do. Bridget, thank you very much for your time this morning. This was wonderful.
Thank you.
This was a really great interview, and I think what our listeners might find interesting is you also had the opportunity to tour the Shinola factory while you were there talking to Bridget.
Well, that's absolutely right. Will Carlson, our fabulous engineer, and I did have a chance to tour their facility, and I think what was very interesting for me to see this was not the typical kind of assembly line system. This was set up in a way that was very intelligent. It was very clean. It was very polished. It was, the parts that they're dealing with watches are so small that you have to be very precise in the assembly of these. And it's very obvious when you go through their facility how important quality is. And I was very impressed by that. And so, when you think about the role of quality in the product you make, Shinola is a perfect example. And then the other thing that I think really struck both Will and I was the assembly facility and the office space was all very open. And really what that allowed is it allowed for what we would call the frequency of collision, where people are all the time running into other people and collaborating on things. Misty, you'll find this very interesting. If a watch has to come back to be returned, it's sitting right next to the assembly line. So if the people who are getting the return items see a pattern,
wow,
they can just get up and go over to the person or the place where that is at and make that correction right there. I mean, it's just fabulous the way they've been able to connect and do these things. So Will and I got a much better understanding of their philosophy by walking their floor.
Yeah, and that definitely came out in the conversation you had with Bridget, the commitment to quality, the attention to that detail, and as she quoted that employee interview, that passion that goes into every watch, which was really neat. I want to mention that you can also see a couple more pictures of the Shinola tour that Mike and Will took on our Facebook page and get a look at how they had to dress. Mike has this awesome hairnet thing on, and it's a cool behind the scenes look. So check out those photos if you get a chance.
The fourth step in the peer reinvention process, Misty, which is connect, is where we want to spend a little time and talk about how Shinola brings all of that home.
Yeah, definitely. That was a major part.
I think one of the really interesting keys, Misty, was why Shinola actually even came to Detroit in the first place. Can you walk us through that?
She tells the story, I think, pretty early on in the interview. So if you didn't catch it, make sure you go back and listen to it. But she says that it kept coming up. Detroit kept coming up. They knew it was a manufacturing hub, and it made sense to bring it back there. She also mentioned that she's from Brooklyn, so she has this whole New York connection, and everybody tries to compare Detroit to New York. It's really not the same. There's still such a creative space here that New York has lost because of the interest in the prices of living and all of that's been established there. And Detroit still has the grit, the back to basics, and the creative community, and the skilled trades.
I think that's absolutely right, Misty. So what Shinola did, and to their credit, was they looked for a place where there was the behavior to put together a high-quality product. And as they've begun to bring more high-quality products to the Detroit population, they're finding that there is a workforce here that can provide and deliver the quality that they expect. I think what's really interesting, so you put a company with an intent, and you tie that to a population of people who can deliver that. But I think here's what really is even an interesting next step in that connect process is when you do that well, now you have a story that you can tell, and that story has incredible passion to it.
I think there's an interesting reinvention sub-story with the skilled trade workforce here, that those skilled trades may have been on an assembly line, and they find that they can translate those and reinvent themselves and the career path they thought they were on to a new job, to a new industry, and still find it incredibly meaningful and gratifying.
I think that, therefore, this whole reinvented workforce approaches their work differently. And they have that passion. And when you walk their floors and you watch the employees greet strangers, because Will and I were strangers walking through that facility, but they greeted us as if we belonged there. And so they were passionate, they were proud to show you what they were doing, they're proud of what they're making, and that allows Shinola to then blow out on the advertising and on the image side that whole passion because they're walking the walk.
I'm not sure if our listeners caught this, but you asked a question early on in the interview and about basically about their core, and quickly Bridget was able to say community was a major part of their core, and I like that for a couple of reasons. One, I think that that's a really meaningful answer, but she didn't stumble, she didn't hesitate. Everybody knows what their core is. There's no question, and community is one of those things.
I think easily one can go through and find a half a dozen examples in this interview with Bridget of a half a dozen ways in which an example of connect is a phenomenal learning opportunity to start thinking about how you take the fundamental assets that any company, any association, or any career has, and how you start to reposition or reassemble those pieces in different ways and get incredibly different results. That, Misty, you can sell with a passion.
That is a great point about the commitment to connection, but the curiosity to continue making those new connections. Shinola recently launched an audio segment, and they're a watch company at heart, so you wouldn't really expect audio from them, but here they are still trying to connect what they do in new and different ways.
I think that it's without question Shinola has figured out how to, what is the infrastructure like, so no matter what product they choose to get involved in, the way they connect it to their employees, the way they connect it to the community, the way they connect it to the marketplace, the way employees connect with each other, and the way they can sell that story to the marketplace always gives them that competitive advantage that will be hard to beat.
It's all good and a really interesting and compelling story.
If you're ready for a change, make it a change that lasts. Make it pure reinvention.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Pure Reinvention. Keep the conversation going and get alerts when new podcasts are up by following us on Twitter @Pure Reinvention or sign up for our mailing list at purereinvention.com.